I'm Emily Lutzker.
And I'm Anna Camasia. Today, International Arrivals speaks with Christian C. Diaz Silva, an interdisciplinary artist, educator, and immigration legal advocate. His work deconstructs, rearranges, and exposes the absurdities of the immigrant experience and the psychological impacts of the U.S. immigration system. Welcome, Christian. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. We're really happy that you could take time out of your day to spend some time with us.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Christian, your work takes the form of painting and drawing and performance. Can you tell us a little bit about your background for our listeners, how you came to the US from Colombia, your progression into contemporary art, and your current practice?
Yeah, okay. So I guess I'll start with arriving here. In a way, like my story of migrating to the United States, it's as generic as it gets. My mom and I came here when I was 12. We came on a tourist visa and the tourist visa expired and just that whole ordeal. The first time around, she did do the trek up through Central America and cross the border in the Rio Grande back when that was, I guess, safer but still dangerous to do. But then we came here when I was 12 and it was a very abrupt change for me. In many ways, it was not explained to me that this was going to be a permanent move. I believed at the time as a child that I was just coming here for a moment to visit, or like on some kind of vacation of sorts, even though it wasn't necessarily framed that way. And then we were here undocumented for a long time. When we arrived here, immediately the relationship between my mother and I became one, and she was a single mother. She's always been a single mother. Became one of being more like roommates and being more like I became like her sidekick slash assistant slash interpreter, translator, and I had to go to school, but then I was also constantly helping her figure stuff out. What
Yeah.
now I, as an adult, call admin. I realized retrospectively that I've been doing admin for my mother since I was 13. So while maybe that shift was traumatic, there's also like no room or no space to really process. You just kind of like move into this new life.
Not atypical experience, I might call it. And you already spoke English when you arrived, but your mother didn't?
I, within 6 months, was speaking English fluently. And so I had this realization very quickly that my mother did not speak English very well. And what she was doing to get around was actually pretty marvelous in terms of like just using snippets of words and things to like convey ideas. And but so I did quickly like become this interpreter for my mother.
Mm-hmm. So you arrived with your mom to Florida.
Yeah.
And then from 12 or 13, where did how'd you get all the way to Boston?
Right. So no, right. And so your question was like, how did I get into contemporary art? Like, and like where I'm at with my current practice. It's a funny story that I like to tell because growing up poor in Colombia, I never had any kind of art education, like zero access to, or not even access to, but just exposure to an arts education, arts world, or anything. And then I joined like the local middle school, and that was also just like, okay, what's going on here? Like just getting to learn the language and meet people and make friends, while also working with my mother at night. As we were getting ready to apply to high schools because there were magnet programs, I overheard my ESOL coordinator talking to a different student about an arts high school. And I was like, what's that? But like in a literal, like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And I just kind of eavesdropped and then asked her afterwards what it was. She told me about it. And then I just thought that sounded cool. So, but there was an audition process and to get into this magnet school, even though it was public. And first I thought maybe I can play drums. But again, not knowing anything about auditions and arts programs, I didn't even know that you had to already have experience doing the thing. So of course that didn't happen. And then I thought, oh, I'll try for visual arts. I used to do it all in my sketchbook when I was little. And that didn't happen either because again, no training, nothing, like nothing about it. But then during the summer, the school called a handful of us to do a 2-week intensive program to give us a second audition opportunity.
Ah.
And in those 2 weeks, I was introduced to art making And then I got to go to this arts high school, which really truly transformed the progression of what my life would be here as an undocumented immigrant. And I really like attribute everything to that 2 week intensive where like they were like, here's some watercolors, here's some wire to make sculptures, this is how you paint, like, and then they introduced me to the concept of a still life, like all of these things. And this is a little bit pre like internet Googling. I mean, I think the internet was already around, but Google wasn't as much of a thing. So like when I did that first audition, they asked me to bring in a sketchbook and I didn't know what that was. And so I was like, I just kind of like looked it up and asked around and was like, oh, like a blank book to make drawings. And what I did is I just stapled a whole bunch of pieces of paper to bring to the audition. It was just like, I was just completely unprepared. And when I went to this intensive, they gave me a sketchbook, they gave me tools, they gave me paint. And at the end of the 2 weeks, I guess all of us in the program got in. And now when I look back to it, I think all of us in that 2 week intensive were brown people, just like black and brown, like immigrants. And I think they were trying to diversify the school, which is, it's a high school, it's very special. And it's because it gets a lot of funding from the wealthy people in Palm Beach Island, which is where Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago is. So the school is kind of attached to that wealth, and so it receives a lot of funding. And my whole high school education was more well-funded than any other college experience I've had since.
Well, which it's also amazing because what's happening in Florida now is they're cutting all of the money to the arts,
Right.
as well as not, promoting diversity in the same way. So it's very
But
lucky
but
at
I'm
that time.
pretty sure that this high school, because of its affiliation to that scene, because a lot of the like wealthy people from Palm Beach Island send their kids to that school, and it's a public school, right?
Right.
Will continue to receive funding indefinitely. And to bring it back to my life progression into art, like it really like transformed what was possible for someone with my demographic at the time. Because then the level of arts training that we received at the school made it so that most of us would get into the top art schools in the country.
Right.
And this
Amazing.
is how I then ended up getting into Cooper Union, where I did my BFA. And it wasn't just, Cooper Union is a very elite school, or it has been, and so in terms of like how many people can get in, and there are always every year a handful of people from my high school going into Cooper Union. So I was also able to like move to New York with a group of friends, which was a really nice thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
At what point did your status change from being undocumented?
6 years ago. So not very recently. I did, even after I finished college, I was undocumented here through all of my 20s. I guess I got my green card when I was 31.
Right.
So 30, 31. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
It's wonderful
yeah.
that it didn't hinder you from going to college and doing a lot of things.
It didn't, because this is another part of the story, is that this was a time when you couldn't go to college if you didn't have a social security number, and it was the beginning of schools beginning to grapple with more people. I think before I went to college, immigrant children like me just would not attempt to go to college and just stay home working with their parents. And I had already started working at an electric company as an electrician, and I was quickly like learning that trade. If I had not gone to college, that's what I would have done. And I have cousins in Florida who also just follow the track of their parents in whatever different construction trades. I think about this a lot because I feel like my other path was construction,
Hmm.
and I did have a construction job as an adult later on, but one where I was like mixing colors, and for the company's called Art and Construction. It was like one of the best jobs I ever had, but like they do high-end finishes in apartments and buildings around Manhattan. And I got into Cooper Union. Cooper Union is free tuition, or what used to be. And they technically, since they were given a scholarship from the institution, they technically didn't care, but they couldn't help me with anything else. They couldn't give me any kind of financial aid or anything. And there was a little bit of like confusion at first when I told them, after they accepted me, And some of the deans that I spoke to at the time were like, "Oh, I don't know what to do." And there was like a whole back and forth all summer in phone calls with different people, different professors. And there was a moment when one person just said, and it was a dean, they said, "You know what, just show up here in the fall. There's nothing else we can do here, do for you, but you can start classes." And later on, I found out that what that person did is that they just took my application and put it under the pile and just forgot about it. And they actually had retired that summer. But they really couldn't figure out like you don't have a social security number. I don't know what we can do for you. Like,
Right.
and then of course, by the time I graduated from college, the DACA movement had started. And that, and that was like around 2009, 2010. And DACA really made it possible for, just opened up the path for people like me to go to college, because then universities started making exceptions more officially as part of their policies.
I'm curious to know when you got you said you got your green card, did you return to Colombia?
I did do a trip. Yeah.
Okay.
Right away. Like that same year I did. I was there to this place that I haven't been to and have very little relationship to.
Hmm.
I haven't been there for almost 20 years. And then once I got there, I realized that I couldn't just jump right into seeing all of this family that I no longer had a connection to. So I ended up staying at a friend that I made here at her parents' house the first week. And I just walked around the city by myself a lot. And I realized that this place was totally strange to me. And like
Hmm.
memories of it were the memories of a child. And since Bogota has undergone, like in the 2000s, from the late 90s into the 2000s, which is when I left, Bogota underwent a major transformation in their transportation system.
Mm.
They like got rid of all of these old buses that were 50, 60 years old. The transportation system was that people owned buses individually, and then you held those buses around the city. And then they got rid of that and they installed a whole new bus system the way that we have in cities here. And they constructed a lane that goes around the entire city just for buses. And that urban project really changed what the city looked like, and it was totally foreign to me. Like I did not
Hmm.
recognize it. And then later on, of course, like hanging out with family members or meeting up with my cousin again that I had left when I was little, like he showed me around and like sort of pointed out, like, this is where that neighborhood used to be. Do you remember this? Like, but it felt very much like being uh, 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 not exactly a tourist, but visiting a strange place. There's this funny thing that happens that maybe you've talked about with some of your guests in the past with accents, where now my accent is still audibly Colombian, but it has shifted and is not as easily recognizable. And I remember being in a taxi cab and the driver being like, "You're Colombian, but I can't tell where you're from." And I was like, "Well, we're here." Like,
I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but when you left with your mom, Bogota was a relatively dangerous place. Is that right? I mean, sort of
yeah,
in,
still, I think like yeah, I guess that the history seems to show that it's gotten more safe in the past 30 years. But I bet that some people still think it's dangerous. But and I would say that in the 90s when we were there, um, one of the big factors that drove my mom to leave again. I mean, the main thing is like economic opportunity and just being tired of continuing to live in poverty there and imagining that we can like do something better here, which, as you know, like doesn't turn out to be the case. Like here, you just come to be a poor immigrant as well. Not to say that it's not better. It's like obviously like I received a lot of opportunity. But like a second big factor for her was just like feeling unsafe at all times. She was robbed multiple times in the streets, like at gunpoint even.
Oh,
I do
wow.
remember as a child, like twice our house apartment situation was broken into. Like one time as we were arriving, we saw the people trying to break in. Like it was just like definitely crime and petty crime has always been a thing there. But I honestly can't speak for what it feels like now. You know, politically, Colombia now is in a very different place. They had a lot of conservative governments for a long time, and just now they chose one of the former heads of the FARC the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, which were the guerrillas that had been like in conflict with the government for decades. And there's still some who have not demobilized, but now the president is one of the former heads of that guerrilla group. And so
Oh,
I
wow.
don't know what things look like there now, but yeah.
Do you feel Colombian or American or something else?
I like this question. I like getting to answer this question and say I don't feel Colombian. I don't feel like that part of my life plays a big role in like how I construct my identity today as an
Mhm.
adult. So the first thing I would say is like I don't have it pinned down, and I think my identity is still like in formation at all times. But one thing that is clear to me is that I don't really feel Colombian. I don't feel Colombian in the way that other people are proud of their heritage and the culture that they received from their parents and the culture that often like nurtures you as a child. I think I didn't have any of that. The association is there, and also it's there almost always linguistically. Like now that I'm raising a child, I'm realizing how much of like Colombian specific jargon I'm passing on to her because I speak to her only in Spanish, and it's there. And then um, sometimes like the smells of fruits like will sort of activate memories and things like this. But then do I feel American? No. I was undocumented
Well,
here.
I'm
I
not sure
like I
that
might
I
bring to
feel
the
American
same.
either. Yeah, I'm not sure I feel American either, which is a
Mhm.
funny question. I mean, I definitely would say like I'm a New Yorker, if people ask me
As I would say that too.
Yeah. Anna, do you feel Canadian?
That's a longer question, I think. Like I've moved around so much, and I started out being born in Britain. So I was just thinking, I'm right now in London, and my mom's Welsh. So I grew up in Britain until I was 9, and so it feels familiar, but I don't feel British. I guess I'm more Canadian than I am anything else. And I'm going on a trip with my dad, who's 80, to Kenya, where he was born next week.
Um,
And so he hasn't been for 30 years. And so that's going to be an interesting trip for him, just like in terms of you talk about changes in Colombia.
mhm.
Kenya too has gone through a lot of changes. So it's going to be an interesting trip of thinking about kind of where you came from and where things are at now, but also where you feel the most. And I think, so many people I talk to talk about this, the diaspora always kind of feels a little bit at in this other space that they're not American, they're no longer Colombian, but it's this other space that you exist in. And I
Yeah.
think that probably is more accurate to thinking
Yeah.
about diasporic populations.
Yeah, I really relate to that. Stuart Hall, the
Yeah.
I guess is a Jamaican born
Yeah.
theorist. And then reading his work for the first time in my life allowed me to feel a sense of like I want to say volition around my own like personhood in the world, because he really talks about what you just mentioned, just that the diaspora becomes another space. Like it's just like a different space that is not about identifying with nationalities, that is not necessarily about holding on to cultural traditions, roots, but rather just like developing like a new understanding of what it means to be self in this like immigrant world. Yeah, reading the work of Stuart Hall and other like Caribbean thinkers like Glissant,
It's
Edouard
Glissant,
Glissant.
Edouard
Yeah, yeah.
Glissant. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and just like reading all this work like has also allowed me to like a little bit let go of the ideas of identities and then like start to figure out something else for myself.
This whole idea, I mean, he brings up too this idea of visibility and invisibility, and you don't necessarily have to make yourself visible, and you don't necessarily have to
Yeah,
do it, stand in for or speak for, and can
the
be
right to
productive too.
opacity.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really like playing with this a lot now in my life, just like in how I like think about making my work in the studio and like also like the performance work and the performance collaboration that I've been engaged in for years. Like I'm really trying to figure out a way to like not necessarily completely do away with that upbringing, but just hold it there in the background. And I do actually get a kick out of and like have fun letting it out with my daughter. And that's a weird, okay, like I don't want to be the immigrant dad, But there's something nice about doing it in the safe space of the home where I know that we're not interacting with the identity politics of the outside world, right?
So I had the extreme pleasure, I'd say almost glee, in seeing you perform it at Movement Research this past June with Gabrielle D'Angelo. And the piece was called Experiments with Ghouls and Other Demons. For our listeners who didn't get to see the work, you came out on stage with this wild expression on your face that was frozen into an extreme happy open mouth gasp, and you're wearing a button-down shirt and no pants. Just an aside, I'm always a fan of this look, a man with a shirt and no pants. It's so bizarre. And then you had dress shoes on with socks. And so you start at the back of the stage and you proceed to run straight forward towards the audience with this expression frozen on your face, and then you retreat in slow motion. And then you did it a few times, repeating it. And then this salsa music started playing. What was the music?
The song is called Bang Bang, and it's by one of like a musician that I listen to a lot. That and it comes from the time but before salsa became what it is today, that transitioned into all kinds of cumbias and all of that. But when salsa was more like in the jazz tradition with combos and things like this, and also like large orchestras. So it's called the Joe Cuba Sextet, and I listen to all this music all the time. This is another way in which like I'm like, okay, sure, there's some identity there. I did grow up listening to this music. And then as an adult, I rediscovered it. And that song in particular is just really fun. But it also does something unique, which is that it plays with when the song begins and ends, or like there's these moments in the song when it like I was realizing talking to a friend that it felt like the song was on loop, but in fact the music is that. So it comes
Right.
to an end and then it starts again.
And you were on loop, just like the music is on a loop.
Right.
So, right. So the performance started out kind of silent and strange, and then the music came on and it became sort of zany, but without losing its weirdness. So you continue this repeated run and slow motion retreat with the music. And then Gabrielle emerged, and she's wearing this pink and white sort of girly outfit with a big purse, and she goes to the side of the stage and takes this lunge position, kind of almost like she's taking her stake on the stage, but also kind of a little bit frozen in slow motion and smiling also. And then she goes to the other side of the stage, and then you're doing this retreat and advance at the audience. And then you start saying these lines that were also odd. It wasn't me, or not me. Gabrielle sits on the floor, gets these toys out of her bags, and sort of that stuck to the floor, and then they start popping out, and you're doing the advance and repeat and saying it wasn't me. It was this cornucopia of weirdness, and it gave me the impression of like all of these kind of absurd actions and personas that we put on for the external world, and these weird things that we do where our inside ghouls, might have other intentions and expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how this piece came about and your collaboration with Gabrielle.
Yeah, I really like your description of it being like a cornucopia of weirdness, and because it is of course like that is part of the intention, and it clearly like that reverberated with the audience, right? That there's just like one weird thing happening after the other, but they're also all kind of layer in a very specific and like precise way. So it also just seems like one weird thing happening all together.
Yes.
And yeah, I like that way of thinking about it, that we were definitely trying to build a world that gets into a kind of psyche around a particular experience of being in the world, and being in the world in relation to others, and being in the world in relation to others as you're trying to figure out like how just how to talk to a person and how to relate what they bring to you and what you bring to them. And then sometimes that those experiences create like feelings of discomfort and strangeness and weirdness, and it depends, right? I think when we talked last, I was telling you about how much I'm constantly trying to understand moments of subtle racism or subtle othering that I experience in the world,
Sometimes
and
called microaggressions too.
or microaggressions, yeah, and
Mhm.
like how to describe that experience, how to describe that in the space of performance, but not just performance, rather like I want to tell somebody about it. And often what happens is that I don't have enough words to describe it because the feelings and the experiences or the feelings inside of those experiences are often so visceral. And like I'm constantly trying to talk to my wife about like I feel like something weird just happened with that person, the way they interacted with me at the store, like, but I don't know how to tell you why it was so strange. And it's like so it's trying to get at that. And so we were trying to build a world where we could let all of that out. And then as you said just now, Emily, like that you described that as like our inside ghouls like having coming out. And I'm wondering if for you watching the performance, like you were able to also relate to like how those ghouls might exist inside of you, and it's not just my ghouls coming out or Gabby's ghouls coming out. Like, but does that make sense? Like, I'm just like we were interested in like both how it plays out in us, and then once we like put it out to an audience, like what is that making you? What kind of world is it allowing you to like access inside of yourself too? All of that weirdness.
It was both joyful and disturbing at the same time, like
Mhm.
the whole performance, so this aspect of it. And obviously it resonated with me. I was thinking about it for a long time. I ran after you,
Yeah.
we have to, oh, Christian, we have to meet. And it was in this way that life is like that. It's both joyful and disturbing. My own experiences have that as well. And this kind of in between ness, the unsettling, but you just keep going and you keep doing it. You're on a loop. Your activities are on a
Right.
loop. Yes, obviously I totally identified with it. And something interesting you said also about not being able to express these things in words. I often use this. There's a book called Zorba the Greek, and I remember reading it, and Zorba in the story, which was also a movie, he says, "Well, sometimes when you can't express something in words, just dance it." And I feel like that's
Yeah, yeah,
that's
for sure.
that's what you were doing in this performance, and I think that that's the best kind of performance work when you're choosing the way that you express the work, the medium, because it's the thing that expresses it best. And
Mhm.
I wouldn't have been able to figure out how do you express that in any other way, which of course we're now trying to talk about it, which is
Right,
probably
right.
Yeah. I didn't see the performance, but it also sounds very similar to clowning, like to traditional
Mhm.
clowning, where it takes a situation and makes it physical, or it takes an idea and makes it physical in a way that is both funny but can be absurd or can be
Yeah,
very on point as well.
yeah,
Or French physical clowning, maybe.
yeah. And I think that the character specific, I mean, I think both characters, but my character in particular was very much in a in a state of like some kind of more like a clown that you might come out of it, the movie it, the um
terrifying,
so
terrifying
definitely
now.
just like totally terrifying. Yeah. And I see that, and it's funny, while we were working on it, I think that we might have had a sense of like how terrifying or like a little bit of like the scariness of it through the repetition and the steadiness and the kind of endurance aspect of the movement. We knew that that would create a little bit of discomfort, but hearing other people, and I had a friend also describe it as terrifying, like that feeling that they were like terrified the entire time, but also at the same time the performance brought them in and allowed them to stay in the entire time while they were terrified. And so so
Exactly. It's true.
um that's there too. And then to answer your question, you were saying how did this come about? Like how do we make this work? So I first just to say I've been working with Gabby. She goes by Gabby, but Gabrielle D'Angelo. We've been engaged in some form of collaboration for over 12 years now. which has really, it started off as like doing structuring movement workshops for people, like for our peers, for while we were trying to work on using the workshops as a way to like work on movement and develop movement together. I started off with doing things like that. There were other points where I was helping her with some particular piece more as a performer, sometimes as a camera person, and then there were other moments when she would come and help me. She has a background in dance and choreography, with like formal training that I didn't have. So she has always been kind of the person that really figures out the choreographic aspect of how something lives on the stage, especially in these dance venues. And so back and forth, we had been helping each other. And all along those years, we were developing a conversation around performance and the possibilities in performance. So we look at performance together a lot. And then in the work that we started making over the years, we were just like figuring out like, oh, there's a potential in performance that we can achieve together as a collaboration that we couldn't do individually. And that from the place of knowing each other intimately for all of that time has now brought us into this like moment right now where it's like, oh, all of those years of conversation and all of those years of choreographing work with each other, for each other. Like she also, at the very beginning, she was teaching me the basics of ballet and modern dance in a very rudimentary way, but really trying to get me to understand like where these movement traditions come from, right? And so while also, I'm telling her about the kind of movement that I grew up with, like mopping floors and, um, you know, vacuuming large offices with my mother. There's something that, like, for me, the way I came into performance when I was in college is like really thinking about the labor that I had experienced until that moment and how much that labor was about really specific kinds of movements that exist in the working class. And like, just, and so, um, so out of that conversation over the years, for the past 3 or 4 years, we've been talking about ghouls and demons and how to manifest those out through performance. And that's how we arrived at this moment of like working through ghouls and demons. And so the way that looks is that we have ongoing meetings that we've had for years where we talk probably every other week and sometimes more when it's leading up to a performance, right? And then of course there's a moment where we just spend every day in rehearsal spaces building the work. And we continue that, and we also have a writing practice where we're writing to each other about the work that we're making, about the movement that we're thinking about work that we're looking at. And just about experiences that we're having on a daily basis. Like, for example, when I became a parent, like that's also informed a lot for me about what performance can be. Like, obviously, the toys in the performance that Gabby was popping. I don't even know what they're called, but my daughter came home with one of those one day, and it was like, what is this incredible object? Like, and of course, I went out and bought 200 of them.
I had
Yeah.
them when I was a kid and I loved it too. It's where you lick it, is that right? And you push it down and it pops
You
up.
push it down
This
and then
one you don't have to lick it. You just
But
kind of
just
like
pop it.
push it down. But
Okay,
yeah,
it pops.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you in our last conversation with you, I also mentioned that I have a collaborator and we work in a very similar way. We meet every 2 weeks, and I think there's something really profound and deep about having this continuation with somebody as a
Mhm.
collaborator and to just have more profound conversations. And like you say, they don't have to be about content creation. They're more just where are these conversations leading us and what are we both thinking about and how do we approach what we're thinking about in a way that is truly collaborative as well.
Yeah. The ways in which it's like allowed me to grow as an artist and as a person is that like one of the things that I think is very important when you're trying to build this true collaboration is like letting go of your own ideas. And people talk about this in protest movements too, is like sacrificing your desire for the good of the whole, for the for the group. And I think that has to happen when you're trying to make work with another person. It's like you might have specific ways in which you want to build a thing, but then maybe that coming forward with that strongly doesn't allow the other person to come into it too. And so letting go of your own ideas, and also that what happened for me, and I guess I want to say two things. One thing that I think happened for me in that process is that it has allowed me to shed some of the more weighty identity stuff of my life to make like this, like work that I think still speaks to my experience in the world, being a non-white person, formally undocumented, etc. But then knowing that I can like rely also on how much my collaborator brings into it, like has allowed me to also shed then the identity a little bit, to make work like this where I am this character that wears a shirt and shoes and no pants. Like I feel like I was able to transcend my image of other, because I think people often like, I quickly, when I meet people, they identify me as an other. Like I don't, you've probably heard about this experience of like the most immigrants are constantly being asked where they're from, and it's either because they look different or because they have an accent, and that experience really like tired me out a few years ago.
Yes. So you
And
just start making stuff up.
yes, and I've been doing it my whole life, and when I was younger, I would do it without knowing that that's what I was doing.
Right.
And I didn't know that I was reacting to this like really aggressive thing of like not being seen as just an equal. And then now as an adult, I'm just like, Anyway, in performance and in the collaboration, the development of that collaboration, it's been really great to let go of that, to let go of the identity that the outside world wants to impose on me. And then I think conversely for Gabby, who is female identified, and I am straight and male identified, like the things that come up for her are a lot about gender. And this is where, like, for the past 2 years of conversations, thinking about the ways that we experience ghouls in the world, like this is why the characters in the performance were so gendered. But it added another dimension to us working together, which was really, I think, yeah, for us, it was really fruitful, and we learned a lot from that. I think in the past with other performances we built together, it was still the identity of the immigrant was very much at the center of them. And so we started to pull away from that.
I wonder about your ideas and talking about it. I think about this common dream that you forget to put your pants on, and
yeah. Mm-hmm.
that everybody has this sort of anxiety dream,
Mm-hmm.
And how that might relate to the feeling of otherness. What did I do wrong? I forgot to put my pants on,
Or, I mean, the other way to interpret that, I think, is also what are you choosing what rules not to follow? Like, I mean, you are your own person, and you can choose not to wear pants if you choose not to wear pants. Yeah. There's that improv everywhere. I think they do no pants day on the subway or something. Just kind of, I mean, maybe it's not really about wearing pants, but it's a way to question the rules that we all follow. Mm-hmm. It's about, I mean, I see that as a kind of critique of hegemony here in the US of like, okay, how can I play with what you perceive me to be?
Yeah. And trying to shift reality just a little bit as a way to access this other space. It's like more
it was psychological space in that performance. And even Gabby's gendered pink and white outfit with her big handbag, how she was in her gaze, she was looking outward, and you had this sort of mask on. That was also very, very gendered in that way. It was sort of, there was so many bits about the performance, and we should move on and talk about something else. But there were so many bits about it that were so sort of subtle, that just added to the whole experience.
I'm going to jump to the last question. I mean, we can come back, but I just think it sort of follows in terms of thinking about when we spoke to you before, you talked about how you became heavily involved in socially engaged work after Occupy Wall Street, working with organizations such as Trade School and Unlocal. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you balance perhaps your social justice and artist roles, and how do you see the ways in which they might influence each other also?
First, I mean, as a continuation, I guess, to the initial question of how did I arrive here from having migrated, but graduated, and I was like, oh shit, I'm still undocumented.
Mhm.
And so in those 2 years, 2 or 3 years, I just kind of yeah, I was just like, what am I doing? And then and in that time, Occupy Wall Street happened. And I was in New York, so I went to the plaza every day after work. And there I encountered a lot of people and made new friends, especially met a lot of Latin American people and other people like me, some people who had migrated here more as adults. But we formed this group that was about, I guess, holding space to have the meetings in Spanish. It was like there was two groups, OWS in Espanol, and then there was also LATAM, Latin American, OWS LATAM. And so, and those groups became a really like um, central hub for me of meeting more people around the city who were working on immigrant rights things. I want to say like at the time there was DACA, and this was 2010, 2011. So I met leaders from different nonprofit organizations working to help DACA recipients, but also at the same time continuing the work that they'd always been doing with asylum seekers, refugees. And so I started volunteering a lot with those organizations, and with one in particular that had just been founded, which was on local. And so I became heavily involved with like just doing a lot of volunteer work for them, which involved just going to their event fundraisers, but also interpreting and translating for cases with their lawyers. And I think because I was in this moment of transition, I mean, and transition into what I don't know, but I didn't know what I was doing with myself, and being undocumented definitely like limited what I could do moving forward after I graduated from college. And there were many jobs that I couldn't apply to. And so um I just put a lot of my energy into that as a way to pass the time and also to feel more connected with this world of immigration rights advocacy. And so I want to say that it didn't have a good balance during that time. And it was like 6 or 7, 8 years of doing that. And along the way, continuing to work on the performance work and my collaboration with Gabby. And prior to Gabby, I also had a collaboration with a different person that we may work for some time. And that work was always slow, and performance is always something that like sort of percolates, and then you spend time in the studio or in rehearsal rental spaces. And but for the most part, I was really like giving a lot of my energy to this volunteer work around immigration advocacy. Eventually, that organization on local was the one that helped me get my green card, or like that did my case. And after I got my green card, they invited me to become a part of their board, and then I was the board president for about 6, 7 years. And um, yeah, so it became a big part of my life. Then once I got my green card, I also became after my getting my MFA, I got a job as a paralegal. So like more officially like getting a job in that field in a different organization. I was working as an immigration paralegal, where most of the work that I was doing was about doing intakes. So intakes are interviews with potential clients, where you're doing a little bit like what we're doing here. Is like, what's your story? How did you come here? What's going on? And then getting all of the details as a way to figure out like what can we do for you? What kind of application can we file? Like how can we how can we advocate for you to stay here? And so in that process, I heard a lot of stories, and I was just in the position of listening a lot. And a story that was like very repetitive was just like the mother, mostly mothers, sometimes fathers too, sometimes families, but mostly mothers, like migrating and doing that trek through Central America, getting on the train, crossing the border, finding coyotes. I don't know how to say it in English, but and I began to think a lot about that landscape and what that landscape looks like, um, what that landscape looks like as you're moving through it, but also what that landscape looks like from a bird's eye view, and just like thinking about like these masses of bodies like moving through the landscape, leaving their print on it, like and and um and that flow continuing, which has always, I mean, it inevitably has always kept for me the story of my mother doing the same thing when she was younger, the first time that she came to the United States. So like those things were tied in the way in which like your question about like how does it influence my practice. I started making paintings of these imaginary landscapes that I was uh, receiving in the form of stories from the clients. And so that's one way in which that work as an advocate like has come into my studio and more
Yeah.
into the where I'm making paintings.
I mean, I was
Um,
really interested in Dream Act, which is this wall installation of drawings, am I correct? Of
yeah,
18 by 24-inch pieces of paper of a
yeah,
dark sky
yeah.
that your mother has described to you.
Yeah, so and
Yeah.
yeah, and that was a piece that I made like as I was leaving college, and I yeah, very much trying to like put into like trying to just draw or depict the feeling of that experience. And what my mom describes is that so one of the things that happened in her long trek through, I think I forget, but I think she like had to fly to Mexico, and then from Mexico she started going all the way up from Mexico City, moving through and getting to Coyote and then swimming the Rio Grande. But she describes that when they crossed the river, which was in the middle of the night, there was a moment when they saw the helicopters with the beams looking around. And so they had to run and hide under a bush. And she just describes like really like staying under that bush, looking and like only being able to see up into the sky, waiting for the helicopters to leave before she could keep running again to like find the highway where eventually somebody was going to pick her up.
Wow.
So like little stories like that, like I carry them and I'm constantly thinking about them. So that drawing was about like what is this like sky that she's looking at, and is it the other side, like, and what is on the other side of this, but also the idea of like it being fragmentary and kind of falling apart, like not totally holding together, because I would not describe our like immigration here as having improved our lives or like gotten us into like it did, or rather her life, like
Yeah.
clearly I received all these opportunities, which I felt also kind of random and like, but we're
Life is
here.
random. Life is random.
Yeah, but my mom is still, I mean, she's an immigrant. I mean, she does like, she's not undocumented anymore, but she's still an immigrant, and we're still like part of a working class, like, or poor. I don't even know what, yeah, I never know what, like which classes are, but like, yeah, um, maybe she feels better being here.
I also think about the metaphors that that stands for too. Not only is it about her story looking up at the sky, but also the sky and kind of what that holds in terms of the imaginary of like
Yeah,
you say, it's this the possibilities and then the realities, which I like in the fact that you fragmented these images and it's not a, a beautiful sky that you're looking at. It is
yeah,
this fragmented idea of what that holds or what the future holds or what this other space holds too. It's
yeah.
this space that you don't know.
And it's mostly darkness too. Like the when I made the drawing, it's mostly just complete darkness, with some clouds here and there. And
Mm.
then and the way in which I can connect that now to the work that I'm making more recently is that again then I got this job and I started volunteering in this world where now I'm hearing hundreds of stories like that one that I grew up with from my mother, right? And so I think I just immediately started once again thinking about the landscape and the experiences that those people are going through, and that's when I started making these felt paintings that are again about these imaginary landscapes, thinking about people passing through the land and leaving their mark on it. Yeah,
It's forms
so
of mapping in some ways too.
they yeah they
Yeah.
do function for me like maps, and I'm definitely thinking about that like Google Earth view. I mean, that's the main reference I have, like when
Hmm.
Google Earth came out, I remember like really like looking around. So yeah. So and then just to come back to the idea of like how did I balance like the advocacy and the art, I think that I didn't do a good job at that. And I was kind of just mostly like trying to survive, doing this thing that was very nourishing for me to like
Yeah.
getting to like lend my skills as an interpreter, discovering that I was a really good interpreter from having done it with my mother my whole life.
That's, yeah.
Once I became a paralegal, I got really good at it. And so, I think what happened was more that I did that work, that advocacy work for many years. And then once I started transitioning out of that, recently, like in the past 3 to 5 years, I was able to like bring those experiences into the studio.
What are you excited about for the next little while coming up?
Yeah, that's it. What am I excited about? So there's a lot of work happening in the studio right now. It's slow. As a parent, so much time is taken up by childcare, just like spending time with my daughter and also just with the whole family. And so uh I'm one thing that I'm excited about is um learning to find a new pace around the studio production. Like, so that's happening, and I'm about to start teaching, but I've been using summer to work in the studio a lot. And as I go into the semester, I'm looking forward to like carving out pockets of space to continue making those paintings. And at the same time, like this collaboration with Gabby is growing, and we have also, like I said, for 2 years now, we have fallen into a very nice rhythm of meeting every other week, and I'm looking forward to continue to develop that work. Yeah, and hopefully to do like have another performance next year.
Well, hopefully I'm around to see the performance.
Yes,
Yeah,
me too.
Yeah, hopefully I'll get to see
I
you
will
perform.
definitely keep you in the loop. Yeah.
Thank you so much
Oh,
for joining us here today and for chatting with us and sharing about your work and your life. It's been really great to have you on the podcast.
thank you
Thank
too.
you.
And thank you. It's really great to talk to you. I'm so glad that you ran after me, Emily.
Oh,
Yeah,
it wasn't a random thing. It was because the work shined. So I'm glad I ran after you too.
thank you. Yeah.
If you want to find out more about Christian and his work, you can visit Christian Diaz, ChristhianDiaz.com. That's Z.com.
See if you're an American.
If you're an American, that's right.
Zed UK.
Yes, not from the UK or Canada.
Please take a moment to hit the like button, rate us, and review the show. It makes a big difference in helping us reach more listeners.
Your tax-deductible donations make this podcast possible. Please support us at internationalarrivals.org.
Welcome.
You have arrived at your destination.
Benzi, Auto Place.